They call it the Strip, a 4.2-mile monument to the magnificent, the impossible, and the gloriously bad decision. An artificial jungle of light built on sand, where fortunes are forged and, more often, unceremoniously pulverized. For decades, the only things that truly flew over this oasis were jets full of tourists and the occasional high-roller-s helicopter. But what happens when something ancient, something truly elemental, decides to cash in its chips? They're creatures that belong to the canyons, to the silence of the high desert. The California Condor, a bird with a wingspan that could shadow a small car, a face only a paleontologist could love, and a job description dating back to the Ice Age. Nature's cleaner. Their entire existence is a subtle, unsettling countdown. They wait for the end of things. They are the ultimate, patient connoisseurs of the inevitable. And they are rare. So rare, in fact, that seeing one circle overhead is an event. The entire wild population sits at just over 300, a precious, carefully guarded secret of conservation science. But this isn't a story about conservation. This is a story about critical mass. About a moment when the scales tipped from a miracle of life to an omen of something far less pleasant. It happened on a Tuesday, the day after the biggest heavyweight fight in Vegas history. The day the city, still dizzy and blinking from the excess, didn't think it could be surprised by anything else. They were wrong. So beautifully, terrifyingly wrong. The security feed footage we've only seen fragments of it is like watching a glitch in reality. For 20 minutes, the sky above the McCarran International Terminals, normally a carefully choreographed ballet of air traffic, looked speckled, not with clouds, but with motes of darkness, rising in density like static on an old television screen. But soot doesn't beat its wings. A cloud inversion doesn't possess the kind of chilling, prehistoric majesty that was about to unfold. The source was a decommissioned industrial yard, 15 miles west of the Strip. We do not know the who or the why, yet that S, the mystery that keeps the light on in our office at 3 a.m. All we know is that someone, somehow, managed to coordinate the simultaneous release of 5,000 California Condors. 5,000. That's nearly 10 times the existing wild population. It was an ornithological impossibility, a logistical nightmare, and, for the first few minutes, a breathtaking spectacle. Imagine a living black curtain unfurling over the desert floor, silent and purposeful. They didn't fly west, toward the mountains and the silence. They flew east, straight for the neon, the noise, and the shimmering promise of a buffet. They flew for the Strip, and when they hit the air above the resorts, their sheer density blotted out the sun. It was an instant eclipse. A sudden, total darkness that had nothing to do with physics and everything to do with drama. Down on the street, people looked up, shielding their eyes, thinking it was a drone swarm, a promotional stunt, or maybe a sign that the cocktail they had last night was finally kicking in. But then the shadows deepened, and a low resonant thud echoed from the glass facade of the Bellagio. One of the larger males, a magnificent creature named Big Tony, we only know that because of a tiny, barely visible tag, had found the reflection of the sky a little too realistic. The first casualty of the Vulture Vault was a window pane, and the tension was only just beginning to settle in like a fine, chilling dust. The novelty wore off fast. For the first few hours, the city tried to treat the Condor convoy as a bizarre, spontaneous festival. Tourists snapped selfies with the huge, shadowy birds perched precariously on the Welcome to Fabulous Las Vegas sign. But 5,000 birds, each with a 9.5-foot wingspan and a digestive system designed for efficiency, quickly shifted the mood. The problem wasn't what they were doing. It was who they were. These were not pigeons begging for breadcrumbs. These were magnificent, intimidating avatars of the wild. And they had just claimed the most manicured, meticulously controlled piece of real estate on the planet. They established a new hierarchy of altitude. The Strip's most exclusive rooftop pools, which once commanded views and bottle service, were now prime real estate for the Condors. They roosted, silent and observant, on the golden domes of Caesar's Palace, the apex of the Stratosphere, and the very tip of the Eiffel Tower replica. Look up, and you weren't seeing structural beauty. You were seeing an unsettling, gargantuan gargoyle convention. Imagine the sound of 5,000 sets of massive wings taking off all at once. It wasn't a pleasant flutter. It was a noise like tearing silk, or maybe a dozen sails snapping in a gale. They weren't aggressive, not yet, but their presence was a suffocating, atmospheric dread. The air became heavier, thicker, and oddly cleaner, which ironically was half the problem. Condors don't just sit and look pretty. They wait, and they only congregate like this for one reason. The subtle terror was the realization that the world's largest flying bird had chosen the world's largest collection of buffets and bachelor parties as its temporary home. It was nature's grim, black-feathered commentary on human excess. Vegas was their pantry. Now, the official response was classic Vegas. Confusion, followed by frantic damage control, followed by an ill-advised multi-million-dollar condor-proofing initiative. The press, of course, loved it. News headlines went from condors roosting on rooftops to Condornium, the high-stakes game of scavenger poker. The first truly bizarre incident that broke the tension and introduced the element of dark humor happened at a popular magic show venue. One of the illusionists, known for making a motorcycle disappear, tried to use a low-frequency noise emitter to scare the birds off his roof. It didn't work. Instead, the vibration seemed to interest a curious group of about 50 condors. They descended, not in a panic, but with professional curiosity, landing precisely in the courtyard where the magician was doing his famous card trick. They sat and watched the show, unblinking, unimpressed. This is where the story gets subtly, deliciously spooky. The condor is an intelligent bird. With that many of them, congregating in that kind of synchronized silence, it created the overwhelming impression that they weren't just there. They were observing. They weren't tourists. They were auditing. We're left with the image. 5,000 black, 6-foot-tall spectators, perched on the edges of our glittering, manicured lives, casting judgment from above. The mystery isn't where they came from. It's what they were waiting for, and what happens when they decide their patience is finally at an end. The silence of the condors is the loudest sound in Vegas. But they're waiting for something specific. Tell us in the comments below, what do you think 5,000 California condors are really waiting for on the Vegas Strip? Is it a meal, a message, or simply the end of our magnificent illusion? Like this video, subscribe for more investigations into the beautiful and the bizarre, and don't forget to ring that bell. You never know what's coming next, or what's watching you from above.